Today we're going to begin a series on the real Jesus. We're living in a time of prophetic fulfillment, and there's so many questions about Jesus or Yeshua during these days. And did Jesus just show up just 2,000 years ago? Was he a dude that just lived for 33 years and out of his speaking and actions came a brand new worldwide religion called Christianity? Or is there a record of him all the way through the scripture? All the way through, from Genesis all the way through to Malachi, all the way from Matthew, all the way to Revelation. Who is this man? Is he coming again? What's it going to look like when he shows up? How is he going to come? So today I want to begin with looking in the Old Testament, in the Old Covenant, at signs of Jesus. And I want to ask the question specifically today, why have the Jewish people not been able, for the most part, to recognize Yeshua in their scriptures? And so today, let's look at this, all right? Beginning in Genesis 1, verse 26, God said, "Let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness." And if you notice there, that's plural. God there, the Godhead, is speaking, talking this over about this creation of mankind. Then later on, when we get down to David, King David, in Psalm 110, he said, "The Lord said to my Lord." Who's he talking about? He said, the Father said to the Son, "The Lord said unto my Lord, you sit here until I make your enemies your footstool." So we're beginning to see throughout, and many, many others that we're not going to cover today, but just little snippets of revelation of the Son of God in the Godhead. Now then, I specifically want to go to Isaiah 6, and I love this passage. It's one of the most exciting, I think, in the Old Testament, and Isaiah was such a great prophet of God. But Isaiah had an open vision of heaven. And as he is worshiping one day, just minding his business, he's just worshiping God in the temple, he has this open vision of God the Father seated on the throne. And his train, it says, his majesty, his glory filled the temple. And Isaiah gets so excited because he hears a conversation that's going on in heaven. Now let's look at what that conversation was. He heard the voice of the Lord saying in verse 8, Isaiah 6:8, he said, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" There's that plural again, us. Then Isaiah said, "Woo, look up here, look down here. Here I am, Lord, send me." And so God said to him, "Go and tell this people this message." He was saying, Isaiah, okay, I'm making you an assignment. You are to go to the Jewish people because they are the ones who have the revelation of the living God out of all the peoples on the earth. Go and tell them this message. Keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and return and be healed. And Isaiah is devastated. It's like, what? I thought I was going to get to give a good message. This is terrible. And he says, "Lord, how long do I have to preach this kind of a message?" And the Lord answered and said, "Until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitant, the houses are without a man, the land is utterly ruined." And on and on. But then in verse 13 he says, "But yet there's going to be a tenth, a tithe of the people, a tenth of the people, a remnant, in other words. And they are going to be the stump, that even when the tree is cut down, the stump remains. There's life in the stump. These are going to be the ones who will have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to understand." Now then, something really phenomenal right after that. I want you to look at this with me. beginning in the very next chapter, in Isaiah 7, after God has made this declaration, this proclamation over the Jewish people, this blindness, this deafness, this inability to perceive what He's going to do, except for a remnant, immediately thereafter, Isaiah begins to prophesy then about the coming of one who, he says in verse 14 of chapter 7, the Lord Himself is going to give you a sign. Behold, the young woman, the virgin, shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call His name Emmanuel. Then, right after that, in chapter 9, he starts prophesying again, verse 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon His shoulder, and His name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God. Now, he's not talking about some ruler in Israel, some man. Who is he talking about here? Who is Isaiah prophesying that's coming? He's Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of His government and peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over His kingdom, to order it and establish it with justice and judgment from that time forward, even forever. And this will happen because the zeal of the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, will perform it. Now, who is Isaiah prophesying about here? Then he moves on to Isaiah 11, chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. And there shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse. He's being very specific now. A man named Jesse is going to be born. He's going to have someone come up out of his lineage, and this branch shall grow out of his roots. And this individual, the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of the knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. Who is he prophesying about? Verse 10, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse who shall stand as a banner to the people. For the Gentiles, the Goyim, shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. So whoever this individual is, he is going to be not only for the Jewish people that Isaiah is specifically prophesying to, but he's going to be for the Goyim, for the Gentiles, for the nations. Those who do not know the living God, they're going to come and be joined to those who know the living God. Who is this individual? And then Isaiah throws in chapter 14, verse 1, just kind of as a little side note here, he says, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and He will still choose Israel and settle them in their own land. The strangers will be joined with them, and they will cling to the house of Jacob. Well, that's a whole other message about the land of Israel and God choosing it for the Jewish people. But today, over in Isaiah 42, Isaiah prophesied about this individual. And he said, behold, my servant, God is saying, whom I uphold, my elect one in whom my soul delights. He's talking about an individual here. He's not speaking about the nation of Israel. He says, I have put my Spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the Gentiles, to the Goyim. Here we are again. He will not cry out, nor raise his voice, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break. Smoking flax he will not quench. But he's going to bring forth justice for truth. And then he said, but listen, you deaf, those whose ears have been stopped up, whose eyes can't see, whose heart can't understand. Look, you blind, that you may see. Who is as blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger whom I send? He's not talking about the individual there, the servant, the man. He's talking about his people, who he also calls his servant. He's talking about them, the ones that he put the blindness on, the deafness on, the heart that couldn't understand, except for the remnant. And he says, who is as blind as he that I created to be perfect, his nation, and as blind as the Lord's servant, seeing many things, but you do not observe, opening ears, but you do not understand, you do not hear. Yeshua, Jesus, is the one Isaiah is referring to here. We're going to talk more about this in our next segment.